Hello users, and welcome to another episodic installation of Above It All, the show in where I present to you the news and important information, usually across the United States of America, but sometimes I do international news if I have a good enough understanding of what's going on. So, this is somewhat international, as a lot of the international laws regarding freedom of speech have been violated by the United States of America, the country that prides itself on free speech, the country that prides itself on its constitution that nobody knows any of the amendments toward or actual text of. These people, and by these people, I mean anybody that supports the police, are not people that agree with free speech. If you support the police as an institution, if you want to say, oh, my brother's a cop and he's a good guy, whatever, okay, I disagree, but whatever, we can agree to disagree. But if you support the police as an institution, you are racist and you are against free speech. You are an authoritarian dirtbag. So I'm going to read to you this article here. Police in the United States committed 125 human rights violations in response to George Floyd protests, according to a new report from Amnesty International. Personally, I think that is significantly undercounting that number, especially if you factor in that this has only taken place from 2 weeks or so after George Floyd protests, which I think provides a very implicit implication that protesting is over, which is not the case whatsoever. Protests have been growing and getting further and further and further along ever since then. So it's important to understand this only covers May 26th to June 5th. In the report published Tuesday, Amnesty alleges the violations occurred in 40 states and the District of Columbia during demonstrations following the May 25th police killing of Floyd in Minneapolis. In examining the police response to protests between May 26th and June 5th, the group found that the law enforcement agencies violated protesters' rights to peaceful assembly and association through intimidation, involving the use of militarized equipment, excessive force, including the use of batons, kinetic impact projectiles, tear gas and pepper spray, and the targeting of activists, journalists, legal observers, and street medics. Among the alleged human rights violations are incidents such as the use of pepper balls and smoke canisters to clear protesters from Lafayette Square in Washington, D.C. ahead of the June 1st photo opportunity for President Trump, and deployment of tear gas by Philadelphia police on protesters who were trapped on Interstate 676. In some instances, the excessive use of force that caused severe pain or suffering may constitute torture or other ill treatment in violation of international law, the human rights organization said. Amnesty International urged Congress to pass the Protecting Our Protesters Act of 2020, a bill introduced in June by Representative Ilhan Omar that would allow the prosecution of officers who willfully kill or injure protesters through use of force. Now again, there have been at least a dozen known protesters that have been killed in the time from May 25th until now. Now, it's hard to keep track of all these protesters that were killed, but most of the cops, if not all of the cops, I haven't seen any follow-ups, but I have some small faith in humanity, but I honestly shouldn't. But most of the cops, if not all the cops, got away with it. Just like most of the cops that kill people in custody get away with it. You know, that's how it works. Through the use of force, and eliminate the transfer of military equipment to law enforcement agencies. The Senate rejected a proposal last month that would have ended the federal transfer program. One of the most absurd things is that we have a military budget that is bigger than the rest of the world combined, and then we have a system where they get new equipment every 6 to 8 months, and then they give the old equipment to police departments. So police departments all across the United States of America are using military-grade equipment. For what reason? Because this is a fascistic government, and we are not in a free country. This is an occupied territory, and the occupation is by the colonialist, imperialist, fascist authoritarians in government. Both Republicans and Democrats are to blame. Obviously, if it can't pass the House, then there's a big problem with this. Amnesty International also recommended that the Justice Department develop national guidelines on use of tear gas and less lethal kinetic impact projectiles. I appreciate that less lethal is in quotes there. To ensure compliance with international standards, including restricting their use to situations of last resort. And this is a quote coming up here. Little has changed in how police respond to protests against police violence in the 6 years since Ferguson. Now, let me tie this in here. This is not since the 4 years since Trump was inaugurated. No. The 6 years since Ferguson. Yes, all you Democrat fucking apologists, all you Obama boys out there, I'm sorry. Your guy is just as much of an authoritarian fascist in policy as Donald Trump. The only difference is their personal belief system. Would I call Obama personally a fascist? Personally, yeah, I would. But he is less of an authoritarian than Donald Trump. And that is a big deal. However, the policies that Barack Obama implemented, for example, renewing the Patriot Act, expanding the surveillance state, locking up whistleblowers, protests and giving military equipment to police officers, all the police killings on the job during the Obama administration that they did nothing about. You have to understand, this is a bipartisan thing. Both parties love killing protesters. They love it. That is one of their favorite things. Democrats just don't like saying it out loud as much. It is important to understand this is not a Trump problem, and this will not go away when Biden is elected. This is why Biden needs to be inaugurated from a bunker, and we cannot stop pushing. Otherwise, all of this work would have been for nothing. He said, referring to the police response to protests following the killing of Michael Brown in Missouri, just as we saw a militarized police response and the deployment of excessive amounts of chemical irritants, the indiscriminate and unnecessary use of kinetic impact projectiles and physical force against protesters in Ferguson, we have seen those same tactics used against protesters on the national scale. The report found that the police response to the Floyd protests was ultimately a symptom of the very issue that started these protests: unaccountable police violence, as I've been saying on this channel since the get-go. Okay? I just realized that this isn't even taking up the full screen. But as I've been saying on this channel from the get-go, this is a feedback loop. Look at Portland. When the federal troops withdrew from Portland and the Portland police weren't involved, no violence. Nothing happened. When the Portland police took back the mantle of being the fucking loser fascists, then violence started breaking out. It's a feedback loop. But again, a lot of right-wingers seem to not understand that. The organization said U.S. law enforcement policies on lethal force violate United Nations conventions granting the right to life, security of the person, freedom from discrimination, and equal protection of the law. Amnesty International's 2015 report following Brown's death found that no state required the standard for use of deadly force stipulated by international law. Tuesday's report found that only 3 states, California, Washington, and Missouri, have brought their laws closer to compliance since then. Closer to, not with full compliance. What our analysis shows is that in comparison, especially with international law and standards, state statutes are far too permissive, and so it's incredibly hard to hold law enforcement criminally liable when they use lethal force in an unjustified manner, Mazzola said. And that's the end of the highlighted text here. Now again, this is extremely important. This is an article that you need to be sending to people. Now again, police violate Geneva Convention standards every day. And what is the right-wing response to that? Law and order! Geneva Convention only applies during time of war! They don't dispute the fact that the police are violating Geneva Convention standards. They just say, it's a loophole! Law and order! Oh! Again, you need to understand, this is a bipartisan thing. This is both right-wing Democrats and right-wing Republicans. Now, it just so happens that of the 535 people in our national Congress, 528 of them are fascistic. Okay, it just so happens. Okay, that's just an approximate number. Okay, it just so happens that our country is corrupt to the core, and when Biden takes over, nothing will fundamentally change. And you need to understand that. He needs to be inaugurated from a bunker. We cannot stop fighting for justice, because if we do, nothing will happen. Thank you for watching. Y'all have a good one. Share this. This is an important message. Thank you.